Because of difficulty raising money from the property seized from criminals, the Roman triumvirate sought to collect taxes from the wealthiest women in the Republic. This was unheard of at the time, as women did not pay taxes. These women went to the womenfolk of the triumvirs and received support as well as insults from them. The women decided to make their case before the triumvirate and chose Hortensia to speak on their behalf. Hortensia makes a speech before the triumvirate in defense of these women's rights. She questions the motives of the triumvirate and asks firmly that they reconsider. She even draws on the historical context of women in taxes to support her position. Hortensia begins by pointing out that the women have not been accused of committing any crimes. Because this issue stems from the triumvirate not receiving enough money from the seized property, these women's properties are essentially being used as an extension of that debt. These women have done no wrong, and as such should not be held responsible for a debt they do not owe. Hortensia calls the triumvirate out for this and points out that they are being punished in the same manner as criminals without having even committed any crimes. Hortensia uses the misogyny of the Republic as a weapon against itself. She speaks to the fact that women hold no power in this society and are not allowed to participate in political affairs. Women have not been called on to pay taxes in the past, and even when the women of the past did pay taxes, it was of their own free will because the Republic was being threatened. She even questions the motives of the triumvirate in demanding taxes of women by comparing them to past rulers and tyrants who did not stoop so low to demand taxes of women. Hortensia calls their honor into question and insinuates that this is a signifier of their future plans for the Republic. Hortensia's speech is a very brief glimpse into ancient Rome, and I know it doesn't paint a complete picture of that time. That said, the picture that it does paint is an interesting one to say the least. I find it incredibly interesting that the government chose to go after women to make up for the funds they couldn't collect from criminals. I find this extremely telling of the status women held at that time. I'm sure there was a myriad of options available at the time, so the decision to take money from women is very interesting. It's also fascinating to me that they chose to go after the wealthiest women as opposed to all of the women. While one may believe that this is some sort of ethical decision, I'm sure it was simply the quickest way for them to get the money that they needed. Something tells me that they had no regard for the livelihood of the women of lower classes. I also don't imagine that even the wealthiest women had very much to give. Hortensia's historical context for women paying taxes was very informative to me. The idea that women were not asked to pay taxes and yet chose to do so for the good of the nation is very intriguing to me for multiple reasons. I'm amazed that women had not been asked to pay taxes without representation in the first place. The idea that a government would do something so semi-ethical is astounding to me. Secondly, I find it interesting that the government did not go back on this when the country was in need. The fact that the women were willing to give on their own and that the government didn't take advantage of this and ask them to give more than they were willing is incredible to me. I think this gave me a better context for taxation and representation. While I had a general understanding of these concepts, Hortensia's passion provided a different perspective and allowed me to build my own thoughts on the matter. This text made the issues seem much more personal and logical. While this may not be as big of an issue in modern America, this is definitely an issue in other parts of the world, and I do appreciate having this context to help me understand that. I would absolutely recommend others read this. As someone with a great interest in advocacy, Hortensia's speech is an incredible example of how to appeal to those in power to effect change in policy. Hortensia spoke from personal experience and conveyed emotion, while also making logical statements. She even addressed the triumvirate in a way that called into question the legacy that they would be leaving, something that was very important to them. There is power in not just what Hortensia said, but also who she was. To have a woman address the triumvirate and call their honor into question was a great embarrassment for them, but they could not ignore her after she made her case because of their public image. To ignore Hortensia would have been detrimental to the triumvirate because it would have supported her claims that they were not acting for the good of the Republic. They would lose their credibility and likely would have had to deal with a rebellion. Politicians are often more likely to make a change for the benefit of the optics rather than having their mind changed by a compelling argument. Hortensia made a good move going for their public image rather than trying to appeal to their better nature, because this honestly probably was the only way that she was going to get any real change in this situation. Had she simply begged and pleaded for them to change their minds, Hortensia most likely would not have gotten anything out of this, and they would have still had to pay the taxes. I believe that Hortensia is actually an inspiration to all activists and advocates everywhere because of the decision that she made to challenge their honor and to raise questions about their plans for the future of the Republic.